Hello and welcome. I'm Sean Dubay.
I'm Patrick Quinlan.
And this is Supporting Actors, a podcast about the art, business, and craft of acting from the perspective of two sometimes working actors.
Yeah, sometimes. And today's show, we're going to be talking a little bit about what's going on with the unions right now. It's labor season in LA, and we'll be talking about some trends we've noticed and some apps for actors, and we'll finish with by focusing on how to survive self tapes and all that entails, and how you don't lose your mind.
Right. Yeah, nice big marquee topic on auditions. So the WGA negotiations have wrapped up, and they wrapped up fairly quickly, much faster than ours. We go back to the negotiating table.
Dining table.
Yeah, back to the dining table where we have the argument. And WGA largely was fighting for their health and pension fund because it was going to dry up by the end of the year.
So both sides kind of agreed to keep the status quo for 4 years and make sure that the health and pension, that's what the writers got and the studios got, 4 year deal.
Yeah, the AI of it all, I think, is interesting because they were talking about how they have to be compensated if it goes in and feeds the machine. But all of the deals that were kind of in limbo, and this has ramifications for actors as well, because if the Sora deal went away, right, from Disney, which was this $1 billion deal for generative AI video that was going to get integrated into Disney Plus and make those characters available for fan things. That's disappeared now. But we've seen a few instances already where AI tools, broad AI tools, kind of aren't the threat that we were afraid they were going to be, at least not yet. And I would imagine we will try as actors to make that more like we did a pretty good job in the first round of negotiations to get some very good language in there that is a solid foundation that allows us to kind of build from, right? And we can't go in and say you can never use synthetic performers. Like that's not going to happen. But the putting in the provision of like, okay, if you're going to use a synthetic performer, you still have to pay SAG-AFTRA healthcare and pension funds, whether it's a person or not, and like making it removing the financial incentive to use a non-person. And so far, if you listen to the SAG-AFTRA podcast, they've had zero requests and zero conversations with the studios about trying to replace actors. So I don't think that's going to be a problem. And also, like, if you've used the AI tools at all, they're not really ready for prime time in the way that you need for film and television.
So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see, I guess, how offensive the SAG negotiating team like goes, or how hard they go on that. I thought I heard that that was the area of where they were quite way away from a deal before they ended the negotiation.
I could see that to be true. I know that for the membership, that is something that's like a big hot button. So if they don't make some kind of progress on AI, I think a lot of the membership would be pretty unhappy with the leadership. But
like, sorry to jump on.
Oh yeah, good.
Just thinking about the difference between the WGA and SAG, like if you think of the WGA as all writers, and it's like, yeah, we're all actors, but there's broadcast people, there's background actors who make a living,
who will be affected by
who will probably be the front line of like, yeah, where productions can save a lot of money by implementing AI. So it'll be interesting to see what sort of guardrails they put up, if any, I guess, because it sounds like health and pension is going to be number one. Streaming residuals might be number two, and then I don't, if AI is the third topic, which ones take priority? Because maybe you don't get all three in a deal.
You probably don't, right?
Right.
And we'll see. They go back to the negotiating table next week, and we'll find out by June. So, which is not, it's going to go quick. It's only 6 weeks away.
Yeah. And obviously no one wants to go on strike again, probably, but because we haven't recovered the first time. But it does seem like the bigger problem, aside from these negotiations, is just, even if we get a bigger slice of pie, there's less pie in town. So which we talked about last week quite a bit. But
For sure. There's definitely less pie. And that seems to be a case that's affecting the industry as a whole. And now, as we kind of like get into like our next round of topics, the casting has found themselves with a lot less work as well, right? So like this downturn in the industry is not just affecting actors, which obviously like we're historically unemployed, but now even more so, and there's fewer of us that are getting like the small amount of roles that they are. But casting now is also starting to feel that pinch and that change of content, especially like as it leaves the US, right? And I think the majority of their work now is offering out, right, and not going through auditions, and they're getting paid less money. They're not, studios productions aren't covering offices, which is why it's all self tapes now. So like they're continually trying to reduce the cost that they provide casting to do their jobs. And I think we're starting to see some ramifications with that, with, like the amount of casting access apps and classes and things that are kind of like popping out of the woodwork.
yeah, I did notice on my feed like this past week and in my emails, but I guess it just this trend says something about the state of the industry, and it's that everyone has a side hustle now. And
Yeah, everyone does have a side hustle. Yeah, I mean it's bad, and we've both seen this where you see like an actor that is a regular on a TV show, and they also have a side hustle. But
yeah,
which, I'm all for people having side hustles, but I think the biggest gripe that I have with it is that so many of them seem to be geared towards younger, inexperienced actors and like trying to extract money from people's hope, right? And that's something that does drive me crazy. Where you'll see someone be like, "I booked a regular job on network TV, so come join my acting class and like learn how to book work." And it's like that whole methodology, that whole like philosophy to me is like really damaging, because it might, that person's technique developed over years might work for them, but that their ability to book a role is not indicative of their ability to train or teach actors, right? And there's not, I think it's just the industry is in a spot where you have to look at your skill set and think about like how else can I make money with this. And sure, for some people that's going to be teaching, and they should be doing that anyways. And others, I think, look at that and they're like, well, this is all I know how to do, so I guess I'll teach, right? And I think it depends on where it's coming from. If they're actually trying to help people and help actors find their voices, it's like, but what's so upsets me so much about it is that there are no guarantees in this business, and it's so luck dependent, right? Like I was in a
yeah,
casting workshop last week, and everyone was super good, and any one of them could be doing work at a high level, and the only reason they're not is because they haven't had the opportunity. And that's true for a lot of actors across the world, never mind just here in Los Angeles.
yeah, yeah. I guess it's. I guess the reason I worry about it too is just we can all be when times are slow or when your career doesn't feel like it's moving as fast as you want it to. We're looking for ways to have control or to
Mhm.
um, like pound the pavement. And there's a lot of shiny objects out there, and there's a lot of like FOMO, and you have to be on guard as an artist, I think, to you touch in with yourself and just be like, do I want to invest this? Am I going to really use it? Like, am I, or is this a distraction from the thing I should be doing, which is continuing, honing my skills, being in a regular class with a teacher I respect or a group of people I respect, or spending my money in other ways on my marketing materials or whatever. But there's certainly
Yeah.
Hollywood's probably always had this the sort of like hanger-ons who have one claim to fame, and they can help people. But the other thing that comes to mind is just the companies or the tech behind these platforms, and I can't help but wonder what are they getting out of this. Obviously, like they're trying to sell a product they're going to get data from us, and then what? They want to sell it to a bigger company to roll it into some other service. It makes me think of like the conglomeration that is casting networks and all the various platforms. And it's like, oh, I pay the same company 3 different times to use their services for some reason. This is not right.
Yeah. It's probably a matter of time too before one of these casting networks or, breakdown services or something starts offering a similar, like, upload your
Right.
stuff and get feedback,
Right. The Amazon
they're,
effect, like one
yeah,
stop shop. Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. They're going to figure out how to, cut out, or how to create the middleman. Right. And like,
Hmm.
hey, we've got this service and why not do this? And then, since we're collecting all these videos, let's use it to train our AI model. That's,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
which is probably the most nefarious way, and that's probably not what's happening. But I think more often than not, it probably is as simple as, I think it is twofold. I do think they genuinely want to help actors, but they
Right.
also have to make money, and I think it's difficult sometimes to know where the ethical lines are. Right? Ethics are one of those things that it can be a gray area, but I think if you're thinking should you, it's probably a no. Right? It's like,
Mm.
but I just think there's something challenging about charging actors for access to things. And I know it's supposed to be educational, right? It's supposed to be from that lens. And I do think there are some casting professionals out there that genuinely is it, right? I think they do genuinely love actors. They love talking about acting. They like working with actors. They're not getting a lot of auditions. They're not getting a lot of in-person auditions. So classes provide an opportunity for them to do that, and it is actually a service for actors, right? Like, you come in with a lot of questions. Do you see me as this type? Should I think about these kind of roles? Like, these are the questions you get to ask when you're in one of these workshops, and that stuff can be really helpful. But I think there are also some of them that, have cast like an indie short and they're like, hey, for $35 a month, I'll give you feedback. And it's like, it's a cash grab, you know? So I think that's probably more rare than not. But the fact that that's still out there still bugs me, right? And you see a lot of people that aren't giving good advice that are charging people for it, and that just drives me crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that you probably, I know my, university training program didn't prepare me for, and I'm sure, and no, why would they? But it's that you as an artist going out in the world to be an artist have to be on guard to all that will take advantage of your optimism, your hope, like you mentioned, and do your due diligence, do your research, find out from your community, your friends, the internet, whatever. Is this person legit? Do they have something of value? Is this service additive to what I'm already doing? you know, will I be able to financially sustain myself if I pay for another service?
Yeah.
Because it's very easy, I think, to want to be trying really hard. And that's when you fall victim to paying for things you don't need and forgetting to cancel that subscription that, you know, re-upped you automatically.
Yeah.
Or go to that class on Hollywood Boulevard. That it's like, maybe you shouldn't go to that, guys. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we'll definitely have a whole episode on like finding your teacher, and
Yeah.
classes are important, and for so many reasons. Even when you graduate, they keep you flexible, right? They keep you fresh. I see the value in them. You could also work regularly, and that'll also do the same kind of job if you're lucky enough to work regularly, whether that's you're creating your own content or not, right? Like, if you're engaging in the active acting,
Hmm.
then you can kind of go a long way. But if you're trying to stay things that are outside of your strengths, if you're trying to explore those, like a class is definitely the best way to do it. Because sometimes you don't realize what your limitations are, and you do need an outside eye. Unless you're
Yeah.
going to film everything and then watch your playback and be like, well, I can see I'm commenting on this, or I'm not really entering this part of it, or I'm not really letting that affect me, right? Like you can see that on camera, but it's sometimes nicer to work with another person to figure out some of that stuff.
Yeah, totally. Um, I guess that probably brings us to our main marquee topic of the day, the self-tape reality check, considering working with others versus being by yourself.
Well, yes, and there's been so many times where I've been setting up and like, my other half is not an actor, so I don't always want to bother her. She's got stuff going on in her life, so I don't always want to be like, "Hey, babe, can you come read this like 4-page side for me?" And then, because she's not an actor as well, you'll get halfway through a scene and then she'll be like, "Wait, why are they doing this?" And it's like, "Babe, just please say the line," It's like, don't worry about it. Or if you have to be like, "Hey, can you be a little faster on this? Like, don't let me finish this part or whatever." It's like, it's sometimes challenging. Um, so oftentimes I find myself not wanting to be a burden to her and doing it myself, which then is a pain in the ass too, because then you're like, all right, let me gotta set up lights, I gotta put up my camera, I gotta put my backdrop up. We're in a small house in Los Angeles. I have no bare walls in here. So I have to like move stuff, set lights up. It's a whole production, or like back my car out of the garage. And I'm lucky enough to have that space, but it's still like it's going to take me longer to set up than to do the audition in most cases, which then is
Yeah.
like a super pain, right? And it was kind of nice before the pandemic to like drive somewhere in that time. You might have 30 minutes to get, from Santa Monica to Paramount, but it was like in that time you're in the car. I don't know about for you, but I would be like going through like listening to music that puts me in the vibe, or like going through
Sure.
lines. It was like a way to kind of help tie it together in a way that's different now. And then yeah, because now it's like you get everything set up and then you're starting, at least for me, it's like I'm starting to try to get the lines down, and then you run through it a few times and then you spend an hour trying to record it. And it was just like so much easier and faster to go into a room and talk to a person and get one
Well,
nervous take out and then do a good one.
yeah, I guess I think there's a couple things to separate there because
Sure.
I definitely complained a lot about driving across town.
Oh yeah,
So
that's
I,
fair.
especially when you're juggling, a job or other
Well,
obligations, like that
and
was a
that's the whole
yeah,
like real like so overall I do think self tapes are a net positive.
right.
Right. I do think it's a net positive. Not driving is nice. It's made it possible to have a day job, especially now as in the last round of negotiations, we got 48 hours notice, right? For
Right. You
self
can
tapes. So it's
do
like you have a
you can
couple
do that audition
days.
anytime. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So like that's really nice. So if you do have a heavy workload or you have a day job going on, it makes it easier to fit that around. Um, it's easier now with things like Zoom or We Audition to like have a reader that's
Yeah.
live. There are also good AI reader tools that will suffice in a pinch. There's
Well, should we do an AI taste test one day and like post our results and we'll just like dick around with them and so
sure.
I know we've been frustrated by them as well.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes like they'll miss a cue or something if you're not like close to the microphone, right?
Yeah.
Or if you, yeah, some scenes that you get are just like wild, and it doesn't always like pick stuff up. And then some of the intervals you get for like if you have to do 30 seconds of action and then be interrupted by something like that's a lot more difficult to do with AI than it is to do with another reader.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said
Sure.
about great point about, when we used to drive to our auditions and you had your sides like, yeah, you could use that time to really focus. You get there early, you sit in your car, you run your lines, you go in before the waiting room. Um, and and I think that's a huge thing to like, and a difficult thing to try to replicate that in your process for the self tape at home because I've tried. I mean, I've gone. I'm allowing myself. I think I'm trying to remind myself to be an experimenter, to be a mad scientist, to think about the process of the self tape, the practice of the self tape, as
Yeah.
well as the audition. So it's like doing an audit after you finish your tape. Like, did I put in enough time? Did I like, because I think it's very easy to get distracted by all the other things you have to do and then to not actually prep your audition, right?
Yeah.
And
I think that's a good
it's
point.
tempting.
Yeah, it's very tempting, because it is such a to do to set up lights and a camera and everything. You know, that is time previously I would have spent looking at the producers' reels. Like, what have they made before? Who's the director? What kind of tone do they like? What else has this writer done? Right. And have a better picture. And I think now it's easier for me, thanks to procrastination, to be worried about like all of the technical aspects of it and then not put enough effort into figuring out like what is the playing field here, right? Like what game are we playing? Because
Hmm.
that's where you figure out all that stuff and how do you approach this thing strategically. Because otherwise, for me again, it's like I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have read a bunch of things to have like a fairly decent instinct where I'm usually like, okay, I see what this is. I think I know it. But sometimes you'd be surprised when you like look into what the work is that other people have done and you're like, oh, this is not a comedy, and like I should be taking this super seriously. Okay, gotcha. Good to know.
You mean like when you're doing the research of like, oh, these are the writers that were hired and this is what they wrote previously, so
Yeah.
chances are it's probably in that genre or
Yeah, especially like the producers, right? I feel like
yeah.
producers tend to have more of a narrow band of like the kind of things that they've done. Um,
Well, in TV, a
or-
lot of those producers came from it's a
yeah,
writing credit, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
right, right. It's a writing credit, and you do kind of get a good idea for the tone. And I've certainly had things where I mean, I tend to lean more towards comedy just naturally. So, but I've definitely read things where I'm like, oh, this is like funny, and then when you
Right.
start looking into it, you're like, oh, no, none of this stuff is supposed to be funny. If you look at their other work, it's kind of similar, where it's like, okay, they're not looking for me to put my like sense of humor into this. They want me to take this very seriously, which
Yeah.
is, I mean, it's funny because I mean, you take comedy seriously, but there is like a heightened commitment to absurdity, I think, right? Than there is when something's not supposed to be funny.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean,
Well, I mean, this is I don't know, this is another like huge, very challenging topic to talk about because there is like, the characters never know that they're in a comedy, so you can't like be funny. You can't put shtick on things, right? Like where you're like, right? It's like that never works. Right? There's nothing less funny than watching people try to be funny. However, you can take things very seriously in two different ways, and one will be funny and one won't be.
right. Yeah. I mean, I think that like trying to bring that back to the self tapes, um,
Well,
it,
doing your research kind of helps you
it,
figure out what those things are. What is the tone
yeah.
of this piece?
And in the olden days when you could go in the room, you might have a ballpark idea and then quickly learn to get a quick
Yeah,
redirect and then and then boom, take two, and then you're, you know, hopefully I took the note.
yeah,
Um but I'm thinking about that because the comedy's tough because I've definitely put some self tapes together for some comedies that I admire, and I'm like, I know this, I know the show, I know the tone, and you don't get any when you're doing it with your friend, and I made my buddy laugh, and I liked what I did, and then but it's because you are in a vacuum, and you're not going to get feedback on it unless or you're not going to get feedback on it. And the only feedback you could get is a veil check or a pin or a booking, right? There's no time for feedback for actors anymore. So you know, I do miss like getting a chuckle out of the casting associate in the room. and versus compared to doing something I think is super funny and then crickets and just being like, man, was I way off base? Was that too much?
Yeah, yeah,
Like, just hope, just praying. Like the minute an audition from that same office comes in, I'll be like, I must have done okay.
yeah.
Like,
Right, right.
but until then, I'm just like, I think I'm burned. Like they'll
Yeah,
never work with me again
yes.
because you just don't know. You just don't know.
Yeah.
This,
Oh, Patrick, do not call. Yeah, right.
yeah,
Yeah.
on that big blacklist that, yeah,
That's right.
famously.
Yeah.
Um, but frankly, probably like the reality is, there's what we're not talking about too is just all the self tapes. The fact of this, it's now the competition is much bigger, right?
Yeah.
Um, than it was when you could go in the room because just time constraints. So now there's more time, so there's more um, availability to, and they can fast forward through the audition. You couldn't do that back in the day. Um,
Which I think they definitely do, right? And I know this is like a
sure.
big,
If someone's way off, why wouldn't you like you gotta
yeah.
get through
Well,
400?
that and also like if they're looking at 100 tapes of the same scene, like they chose the scene, right? And the
Right.
the reason that they choose the scenes they choose is often because they're looking for a certain thing, or there's kind of only one way you could play this scene, right? And they just want to see what your version of that is. So they're not going to give you something where there's like wild variation or something, most often. So it's going to be usually it's a scene that's going to have some kind of like large emotional transition at like 2/3 of the way through. It'll have some kind of like resolution or cliffhanger at the end, and the beginning is kind of the opposite of that, right? So like there is usually a scene of transformation that you can kind
An
of
arc.
every
Yeah.
yeah everybody kind of plays one way because there's a million scenes in a movie or a TV show where there's always a change in every scene, but it's just like something super subtle and it's adding up to the moment that they use for us to audition with, right? In most cases.
Yeah. I guess we could break that down between co-stars, larger co-stars, guest. Like, I think
Sure.
that's probably more of like uh, a larger co-star to guest star or supporting actor in a indie film or something type scenario. Because
Right.
certainly plenty of hey, you can't park here, like
Right,
lines.
right. He went over there. Yeah, right. Yeah.
You can still have, not to say you can still create a little bit of an arc and a little bit of have some interesting things going on, but at the end of the day, no matter how good your audition is, they have all those tapes, and then there's all so many other variables that go into it. We're kind of getting off the topic of self tapes and into casting, but it's like we've been on the other side of the table a little bit, and it's
Yeah.
just like you are putting a puzzle together, and
Yes.
so you have to make the pieces that fit best. That's the priority for the story. And the there might be three actors who could all plug into that role, or their tapes were great, but one is going to be less distracting than the other two, or one
Or
is eliminated because they look like the other actor in the scene or something like that. Not to
yeah.
mention the dumb reason, like the producer doesn't,
Well,
reminds you of an ex or something, which, famous stories like that. But
sure. Which yeah, it definitely happens, but yeah, and you might most of the time when you don't get it, it's not because of you.
right. Oh no,
Right.
right.
It's like it's nothing that you've done. So I think maybe that's the lens to kind of continue the self tape and audition broadly like discussion is that it's really about being as prepared as possible to do your best job possible because none of the rest of it is in your control and you don't have like nothing else like a great performance is not going to have you book a role that you're not right for, right? Like it's still going to go to someone else like that's right for that role. So
Sure. Yeah.
it's so that and that kind of goes into what you were just saying where it's and there's a million things that go into that and a lot of times it's just like it's what feels right but it's based on the other people like is there a name already cast that they're trying to work around, right? And if
Mhm.
you have an energy that doesn't clash with that in the way that best tells the story then they're probably not going to go that way, right? Whether you're too similar or not different enough, or like you'd be friends, but we need you to be adversaries or something. I don't know. There's a million reasons that that happens, and you'll never know why, unfortunately. And if you did get feedback, and sometimes you, not now, but like when you did get feedback, oftentimes it was like, yeah, uh, good, just not right.
Right.
And and that's as good as you can get, right? And the only evidence you have that you're doing a good job is that you keep getting called back in.
Yeah. And so yeah, exactly. You do a great job. You put all your effort and focus into that audition. You feel proud of it. You send it out, and that's where your job is done. Because hopefully, if you don't book that part, that you've booked the room, right? That casting director is going to keep tabs on you, or is going to they're amazing. I always find it fascinating when I meet a casting director, and you can tell they love it because they just have that Rolodex in their head of names. I'm, as a person who's bad at remembering names, but like pretty good at faces, I'm like I'm always like flummoxed to find the right word or the right name that goes with a person. But um I think that's impressive. So you just have to have like there's an element of faith, I suppose, in it, of just like, yep, I did my job and I'm got to move on with the rest of my life. And hopefully you can craft that self tape and have a process that allows you to return to it again without too much stress and anxiety, I suppose.
Yeah. All
Um,
right. Yeah. So this makes me think, like, what are some of the things then that we do that we feel is helping us do good work, but it's actually getting in the way? So I guess an example would be like, you hear oftentimes that it's like you've got 3 seconds to hook them, right? Or
right.
or make a strong choice, right? Like how often do you hear like a make a strong choice or make bold choices, which is something that like has always driven me crazy a little bit, because sometimes they're not really choices, at least for me in my
Right.
process.
You're like
It's
the
not
scene you're
really,
given.
I'll read it 400 times and then I'm like, I think this is what's happening, and it's like, I don't know, it's just, it's the way that it feels right. And I guess you could make choices, but I don't know, like I've also seen enough people do the same, different people do the same role enough to kind of, you start to figure out that there's like, I don't know, there is a character that's uh in the middle. But anyways, um, for fear of going off track, I think that a trap that we could fall into is like trying to do the most, right?
Yeah.
Let
Oh,
me
100%.
let me hit every note. Let me be perfect. Let me do
Yeah.
100 takes and send in the
Word
one
perfect
that
and
nails it. Right.
the lighting. And I saw an Instagram video, an actor who booked a big job, used music. I'm going to use music, or I'm going to be in a telephone booth or whatever. And it's like, or a bathroom. Yeah, I think it's like getting rid of all the noise and going back to the fundamentals. Because I think, to your point of like, I've definitely been there where it's like, you got to be interesting, you got to capture their attention, you make a big choice. And um now I'm starting to think like, you know what, all of that is just code for be more specific. Like, be as
Yes.
specific as you can about what you think is happening in this scene, in this character, where that resonates in you. And
Yeah.
how can, I know we're creating characters, but the more you can bring yourself to it, that's the thing that makes it even more specific. And then you become, then they're looking, then no one can compete with you. Then, and you're not getting it because you didn't do the scene right. You're not getting it because another person was right for the part.
Right. Well, and I think that's, you're touching on like there's several different paradoxes, I think, at the center of acting. And this is one too, where it's like the more of yourself you are, the more of the character the people see,
Hmm.
right? And there is this super vulnerability where like sometimes, I mean, not so much on self tapes, and maybe sometimes on self tapes, when you're like watching it back, it's like I'll feel like a little embarrassed, or like a little like, I don't know, is that, should I send this?
That's
Like,
see, I'm like, send that. Yeah,
yeah.
like
Well,
send
so
that.
that, but that's, yeah. So that, but that to me has become the indicator that like, oh, that's the take I need to send.
Yeah.
right? If I'm a little nervous about it, if I'm embarrassed about it, if it's the kind of thing that I don't really like, it's probably really honest, right?
Yeah, because the
And that's
perfect image in your head is gonna read phony to someone like to
well,
the
yeah.
viewer.
And then like when something is perfect, it's not
Not
interesting,
alive.
right?
Yeah.
Right, yeah. It's same with like being perfect. And I've sent tapes in to things that I've then like booked where like I flubbed a line or something,
Mhm.
and but it was like the best performance, and I just happened to like trip up at some point because like I learned something on that line, that take, and it's I think there's this instinct to be then like fuck I got to do it again, but I don't. I think that you need to that tape might be fine, and sometimes yes. Well, this is the like there's not an answer. Sometimes you do have to do it again, and sometimes you send that tape.
Right.
And it's knowing the difference I think is a lifetime pursuit.
But I thought of another thing of what something that gets in the way
Yeah.
of maybe doing your best work. And there was I think people have wised up to this, but I think because of the competition since the pandemic, there was sort of a rumor being passed around that like your best chances are if you submit within like 24 hours or
Mm.
you get that audition, you turn it around right away.
Yeah.
And I, you know, one that is that's sort of like living on the assumption that casting won't watch all the tapes um
Right.
and up until the deadline, which just seems to be patently false from just anecdotally.
Almost
Um,
every casting director you talk to, like
it's
they're
like
like, we watch every tape.
they have
They
that's
might
their
watch 10
job,
seconds,
and
but they
yeah,
do watch every tape.
they watch them, and they probably like you would do any sort of task. It's like
Yeah.
okay, cool. Like you start sorting, right, and then it's like you go back to the ones that are like
Yeah.
toward the top, and with all this competition, well, anyway, so to get it in super fast, and I think that can be a good exercise to go through because it can maybe connect you to just your instincts and just be very intuitive.
Mhm.
But I think the fear of this ties in with the thing I can remember, the fear of bringing yourself to it. If the goal is to bring yourself to it, I think there's a trap that you then are a little too casual about it because you're like, oh, I'm just
Sure.
being myself. And it's
Yes.
like, no, no, but
You're
you're
not,
yourself in
you
this
still need, and
situation
you
in
still need
which
to act.
someone is,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Well,
So
and that's the thing where it's like, being yourself, what does that really mean? It doesn't mean are the character. You're still doing all the character things, but to me, what it means is that you're taking it personally, right?
yeah,
You're taking the circumstances personally, and you're reacting in a way, right? Like the way that we were taught in school is that character is like a filter, right? That you're like popping in and out of between the stimulus and the reaction. So the character might not react in the way that you would react in real life, right? But this is your opportunity to react that way. So have fun in exploring that, right? And what is then that genuine reaction for you? And I think that's the part that's like challenging, and like so you're bringing yourself to it. You're letting the character use your instrument, right?
mhm,
To for lack of clearer terms, right? You're letting them do the thing in the way that you would do it if you did do it that way, right? And that's the part that can kind of be vulnerable, and that's what bringing yourself to it is. And it's like you have to 100% be invested in the outcome of the actions personally, right? And then
yeah,
yeah, and then that's when people only see the character. But it's like really embarrassing for you because it brings up all kinds of things. It brings
right,
up like that time when you were a kid and you did this, whatever. It just brings up I don't know, it just brings up weird shit that you can ignore because it's not useful, I find in most cases. But and sometimes it might not, or sometimes it feels gross. Like I've had that happen too, where it's like, oh, I feel really slimy in this role, especially because I tend to get a lot of like arrogant, not great people,
hmm
right?
hmm
And um
problematic, like guys,
problematic white guys, yeah, and you feel gross doing it, right? And like that sucks. And then afterwards, you're like You're like, I really feel like a douche, or like I really feel like a slimy person, and that's like, great. You should be, because that's what that
Yeah,
person's doing, right? So like, some
there
part of
should
your
be a little
conscience is,
residue. Yeah.
yeah, a little residue after the fact, and it's like, you know, I think I'll save an acting topic for the future about like judging your characters, but you know
Mhm.
there is like, but anyways, that's bringing yourself to the role,
Well,
right? And being
so
that's being yourself, right? It's like you're doing it the way that you would do it if you were doing it.
yeah.
Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying, and I
Yeah,
think doing that, um, for me, the act of doing that is sometimes made easier by the pressure of you're actually on set. They're about to call
well,
action, and you have to jump off the cliff and go for
yes,
it. And in a self tape situation in my house, everything is so comfortable, right? And
sure,
like, I think a challenge is to create a process. I'm just constantly like trying to figure out, how do I create this process? Where do I set up? Where do my wife reads for me as well a lot of times? And how do I have to like, you know, what do I need her to do for me to get, like, how do I get to that place of vulnerability that is pretty much just here? And she's not going to be playing along in that world with me. Um, in a take or on the third take or whatever.
yeah,
And so something I've been thinking about is like, okay, well, how could I get that feeling? Like, what could I do
sure.
to juice it? And I think it might be going on the audition and working with somebody else and just taking a take. Just making a tape with a stranger. I think it could be a variety of things. It could be paying money at a studio or a self-tape studio. That might,
The SAG-AFTRA
or going to
studio.
SAG afterwards, free for sure.
Yep.
That might juice it and make it feel kind of like, you're going to the gym and you're like, yeah, I can lift weights, or I can really like go in there with a
Well,
mission and just try to like
there
do it.
is a little bit of something. Actually, the gym is a good metaphor, I think, because you could work out at home
Hmm.
or you could go to the gym, right? And often the times you're going to have a better workout at the gym because you're going to a place to do a thing. And I think auditioning, acting can be kind of the same, because I suffer from this as well sometimes, where um, to me, it has to be for real in order for me to like sacrifice a little bit. You know what I mean? Because
Sure.
like every role has to cost you something. Every audition's going to cost you something. It's going to be uncomfortable in some capacity. It needs to be, right? You have to be vulnerable to do this job well. But for me, sometimes that discomfort is harder to welcome into the room at the house,
Yeah, to
at a self
generate.
tape,
Yeah.
right? Um, Whereas like on set, it's like we're now doing it for real, right? And that's what I mean. It's like, oh, this counts now. Whereas like for some reason, um, I sometimes have a difficulty making that leap for a tape, where it's like,
Mm,
oh, this counts. This you have to go there, right? And like that's been my what I've been working on at the house and with my self tapes recently is like, all right, so how do I let this in deeper? How do I make this deep, like really let this settle into me, so that way when I watch the tape back, I am, that like embarrassed. So it's like, oh, that's my real reaction. That's a real reaction. That's not like me on the surface, right? Because like you can tell when you're like really doing it versus like when you're kind of
right.
doing
Yeah, well, the thing that I want to challenge myself to do is the next audition that comes through that has this opportunity is to take casting up on those Zoom auditions and
it.
do it. I think that would be about as close to being in the room. And from what I hear, I tried recently and they were all booked up. Um, but then it's like you lose a lot of ownership there, right? If you're
Yeah.
gonna like commit and you're gonna get a chance now. I think depending on the project, there will be more available than others, right? So if
Sure.
it's more of an indie feature, that casting person probably doesn't have a lot of actors pounding down his or her door to like take those Zoom auditions.
Right.
But but a TV show, they might book up right away, whatever. But I want to challenge myself to do that. I think that might do it. But another thing that comes to mind with what you're saying, and I totally resonate with that, which is um sort of feeling like, this is just an audition. There's going to be 100 more. I got to
Like
do or whatever.
throwing it
Like,
away, right?
yeah,
It's like,
throwing it away too much.
yeah.
And something I've done in the past, an acting coach did this with me. I haven't. I should probably revisit this technique, but I think we prepared it. We sort of went through the process, and then right before we did a take, she had me like kind of like meditate or like visualize, I guess. Close my eyes and visualize the call, getting the job.
Hmm.
What does that mean? Where do you have to go? Where do you have to travel to? What day are you shooting? Where's set gonna be? Like visualize who's the first person you call after you book that. Because even if it's like, I don't know, a student film that you don't really want to do, but it's kind of cool, so you submit it, and then the audition comes in, and you're like, oh, they picked me. I didn't know they'd pick me. Um, and now I'm busy. I don't really want to do the audition. It's like, well, part of you did. They're like, how
Yes.
do you tap into that instinct that's like, no, you wanted to do that. And if you got the call, if they just offered you the part and you'd been like stoked, like, right,
Oh,
like, oh,
100%.
send me the script. Oh, cool, I get to do this. What, um, so it is like, I think maybe getting more specific about what is the reality of getting that job. What is at stake for me personally, so that I can then be vulnerable and have those anxious feelings I used to have in waiting rooms, you know.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've been exploring and trying to reframe the way I think about auditions, because it can sometimes feel like it's something else that you have to do in an already busy day. You forget that it's
Right.
something you get to do, right?
Right.
And it's like, even if I'm setting up lights for myself and I'm the only one in the room with this camera with an AI reader trying to like do this audition, it's still like an opportunity to say something, do something, right? Like you get to take someone on a little journey. And I think it's, for me, probably a slippery slope for a lot of actors, but I really like the art of creating. And um like I like making that video, and I like that someone's going to go watch it. I'm making it for an audience, right? So I'm some part of me is always directing and is aware of the audience. So, but that's what I really like about it and how I've been thinking about it is that like, oh, I get to go make a video now and show someone something that might entertain them for a minute,
Yeah.
And it's like, and I might not book that role, but they're not going to forget that performance. Like that's the goal, right? And like that's the attitude that I take with it, and like that, thinking of it that way, I'm making this for another person.
As opposed to
Has,
avoid. Yeah.
is yes, has made it a lot easier for me, and that's something that just in general I know is something about my persona, is that I'm willing to do anything for other people and I'll do very little for myself. So it's like, so if I reframe it that way, I'm like, oh, I get to go do this for someone else. And I don't know who they are. They're sitting in another room watching this tape. But I want them to feel something,
But
and like,
they
yeah,
picked your headshot to solve a problem for
yeah,
themselves,
for
right? Like
sure.
the job they. But that's the reminds me of, I think Philip Seymour Hoffman said, like,
Yeah.
every chance you get to act is like, so you might not getting paid, but like someone paid for you to be there, like they
Right.
rented a room back in the day,
Yep.
and now it's like, well, they are getting paid to watch your tape, or they
Yep.
paid a fee to breakdowns to do that, like money has been spent
Yeah.
for your art
Sure.
before it arrived to your door. So that's something to remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I just think like, a good leadership practice, and this is something now from like my professional life, is it's like when you're sending an email, whenever you're sending something off, you want to delight the recipient, right? Because you're more
Mhm.
likely to get a favorable result. And I think you can apply the same thing to self tapes. Is that like you want to like to delight the recipient, and you're doing that with your performance, and it's all the effort you put into to creating that, right? And lighting doesn't matter, sound doesn't matter, what camera you use does not matter. It's like as long as it's not distracting and they can see you and hear you, the emotional journey that you go through uh, should delight them, right? It
Yeah.
should be like, whoa, they really went somewhere, you know, and that's like, I think is just the perspective change that I've had recently that I've been enjoying. It's like, oh, I get to do this now for someone else instead of like, oh, it's been a long day and I have to go do this at 10 p.m. because that's when I had time.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could connect that to, a little more. It's like, what is the energy that you're putting out, right? Like, if we want to go a little woo woo with it, like, I great advice I received pre-pandemic for commercials, which um, I had some success, a lot of frustrations with, and now there's mostly self tapes as well. Is you have to show up, and we know you've been waiting, and we know you drove here, and we know all these things go wrong. You still got to come into the room and be happy to be there. Like,
Yes. Yes.
you have to, like, that's what we're hiring a guy who's easy to get along with, like, as
Yeah.
well as a good actor. And so I
Mhm.
think that obviously plenty uh of people who are not easy to get along with get book jobs as well, but or work on sets or whatever. But like, at the end of the day, like, they are hiring a person. They want a professional. They want someone who can do the job and make everyone's life easier. So delighting them would be a nice cherry on top for sure.
Yeah,
I like
and
that.
that's like, and I think everyone will have their own language, and ultimately it's, we're two people presenting what's worked for us in the
Yeah.
hopes that it helps someone else find their thing, but really it's like you have to figure out what it is for you, like in Bryan Cranston's book he talks about like, an audition is not an opportunity to get a job, it's an opportunity to do a job, right? And it's kind of a similar shift in perspective for me, but that was one recently where it's like, no, I get to go like do something for another person. It's like,
Right.
and that's what worked for me. So, anyways, I guess it's like, think about how do you what makes you excited to get things done, whether it is for you or for other people, and is there a way you can then think about your artistry and your work to make that happen, and um to go from I have to do this to I get to do this, right? Like that's the goal, is to like I get to do this.
Well, and then, like, what we were talking about before, I want to just reiterate something you said earlier, which is like, light, sound, camera, all the tech. It's as long as they can hear you clearly and see you cleanly, and you have it in horizontal mode on
Yes.
your phone, that will be good enough. Now, I know a school of thought out there that's like, it's so competitive, you got to get your tapes have to look a certain way and whatever. And I that your mileage might vary on that. I think for the majority of the auditions you have, that's not the case, but maybe every now and then you want to elevate it. But we didn't talk about like paying to audition, paying
Sure.
like a self-tape studio, paying a teacher, an acting studio, or a coach. Um, there is that aspect of the work that is, I think, becoming more commonplace.
Yeah, I'm a pretty big believer in you shouldn't be paying for anything until you're making money doing it,
Mhm.
right? So,
I've
yeah.
I agree with you, and I've also disagreed with you in the past. Like, I've
Well,
taken the other position. So
as have I.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, but so but I do
Anything
think,
we say here today, we might change our minds tomorrow.
well, but that's just the nature of like
Yeah,
being
yeah,
human, right? Being
for
alive and
sure.
trying, and like the industry is always changing too. And
Yeah,
there are times where I feel like so many of the actions that actors take is because of a lack of control and wanting to have the perception of control, right? If I pay $1,200 for headshots, then I'm controlling something, right? When realistically, while you're starting, a portrait mode shot in decent lighting that's natural,
Would
right,
do the trick.
would
Yeah.
do the job just fine for you from your phone, right? And casting doesn't necessarily care. Uh,
No, they want the headshot to look like you. It's
that's
got to
it.
look like you. Yeah.
It's they want it to look like you. Um, and it's yeah, and then you have like bonus points if it has like a little something extra, which is undescribable, right? Where it's just like it
Yeah.
has like a feeling to it.
I agree with you. I think in a perfect world, it would be awesome to like book a job and then allocate money from that job to pay for your next acting thing, be it headshots, be it a nice backdrop for your next self tape, be it a coach for the next audition. Um, and there are great programs like at SAG-AFTRA who will help you learn to manage money and things like that. But at the same time, I think you're right. Like control, I want to be hesitant of like doing things out of an impulse to feel like control and spending money I don't have um, to do that. Uh, and I also think we are our own business, and sometimes you have to do some market research and you have to do some R&D and like invest in something. So you
But
could.
I think that comes after you've made a little bit of money.
Well,
Like
I'm not saying like, I think you could go and say like, all right, I'm going to spend a little money to work with a new coach, to work
sure.
at to check out a studio. I'm going to pay for an audition to do that. So I'm not going to do it every time. I personally am never going to do it for like a co-star audition that's similar to another co-star audition I booked or something, right? Like, I think I think it would be okay to spend the money in terms of research to know like, oh, cool, if I ever get an audition that feels like I need like this space would really work, or the tapes that come out of this place would work, or I like that coach and I want to spend $100 to get coached on them by them for a scene. You should know that and not wait for the audition to come to then spend that money, because in the past where I've spent money to work with coaches or or to go to a place to tape because it just felt like that was the way I had to do it. And that didn't help. Like the extra anxiety of it being a real audition and a real thing, like, and I'm only spending this money because I think this job is important. Like that took
Yes.
away from the performance
Just
because
doing the job. Yeah.
it was too important when I should have just done it at home like every other tape to like you know focus on the material, I guess. Yeah.
Sure. Well, and I think that's also a trap to fall into is that like I think in some ways if we're being called in, it's like we need to trust casting. They know what they're doing. They called us in for a reason. They've seen our tapes. They've seen something. You know, oftentimes, like you're getting called in for the same room, and it's like you don't need to do more. Most of the terrible things that we experience are because of financing, and that's really what it is.
Capitalism, baby.
Capitalism. It's because of money. It's the only
Yeah.
thing it takes to make a movie, and it has undue influence because of that.
I'd be curious anyone listening who has had disagrees with us or has other opinions or things we didn't cover. I'd love to hear from anyone who whether it's uh a piece of tech or an app that they enjoy or hate, or if it's thing that works for them in their process, because we're just trying to get information out there that you can actively use, hopefully, and avoid the information that's not helpful.
Right. Yeah. Let us know if this is helpful. All right. So ad libs. What
Hmm.
do you got? What's going on in your
Oh,
world that's bringing you joy?
you started off this
Okay.
time
Yeah.
if you got one.
No, I do. For me, actually, Harry Styles came out with a new album, and it's really
Oh,
good. And I'm not you.
this is a surprise. I didn't
Yeah, right.
expect
So
this.
I'm not normally like a Harry Styles fan, and like I mean, I've enjoyed his music. His music is good,
Uh-huh.
but I'm not usually like a pop person in most cases. But his album was very, very great, and I've been listening to it and like singing along for like 2 weeks now. So it's a recommend.
Nice. Something bringing me joy. I with my wife and friends of ours, we have a we do fantasy drag race, fantasy RuPaul drag race. My other buddy, who he and his wife do this as well. We want to devise a proper fantasy like level like tally system for earning points the next time the season rolls out. So that's like you could, we could compete, not just pick winners, but actually be sort of having a horse race the whole time.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Like some kind of ranked point system.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So nice. That's fun. That's very fun. All right. Well, this has been Supporting Actors, a podcast about the art, business, and craft of acting from two sometimes supporting actors. I'm Sean Dubé.
And I'm Patrick Quinlan. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time where we decide how much eye squint is the right amount of eye squint.
Ooh, I'm an expert at that.